Cheating Story exposed the channel dedicated to intense stories of betrayal, deception, and the long road to justice. Sometimes the truth finds you in the most unexpected places. My name is Aaron, and I thought I knew my wife. 8 years of marriage, a comfortable life in the suburbs, 2 cars in the driveway, annual vacations to the same beach resort. The kind of predictable life that most people either dream about or run from. Depending on who you ask, I was the former. I loved the predictability. I loved coming home to the same person every night. I loved knowing what to expect. That predictability died on a Tuesday night in October, in a hospital emergency room, when a nurse asked my wife a simple question that she couldn't answer without lying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Or at least what I thought was the beginning. My wife's name was Colleen. We met in college, sophomore year, at a campus coffee shop where she worked part-time. I was a business major. She was studying graphic design. Our relationship developed slowly, comfortably. Without the dramatic highs and lows that seemed to consume our friends' relationships. We graduated together, got engaged a year later, married the year after that. Both of us landed decent jobs. We bought a small house in a good neighborhood, started talking about kids. Someday, when the time was right, everything was fine, not passionate, not explosive, just fine. Looking back now, I realized that fine was probably the first warning sign I missed. But at the time, I mistook stability for happiness. I mistook routine for partnership. And I mistook Colleen's increasing need for personal space as just her natural personality, rather than what it actually was. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I came home from work around 6:30. Colleen's car was in the driveway, which was unusual because Tuesday was her yoga night and she usually went straight from work. I walked in through the garage, calling out to let her know I was home. No answer. I found her in the bedroom, lying on top of the covers, her face flushed red and swollen. Her breathing was labored, wheezing with each exhale. Her eyes were puffy, almost swollen shut. Colleen. I dropped my briefcase and rushed to the bed. What happened? She tried to speak, but her throat was clearly constricted. She pointed weakly toward the bathroom, then touched her face. I didn't need to be a doctor to recognize an allergic reaction. A bad one. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while I helped her sit up to make breathing easier. The operator asked me questions I couldn't answer. Had she eaten anything unusual, been stung by anything, taken any new medications? I didn't know. I'd been at work all day. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. The paramedics asked the same questions. They administered epinephrine, got an IV started, and loaded Colleen onto a stretcher. I followed in my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Anaphylaxis. That's what the ER doctor called it when we arrived. A severe allergic reaction that could have been fatal if I'd come home even 30 minutes later. They got her stabilized, pumped her full of antihistamines and steroids, and moved her to a private room for observation. By 9 p.m., Colleen could breathe normally again. The swelling in her face had gone down significantly. She could talk, though her voice was hoarse and strained. I don't know what happened, she whispered as I sat in the chair beside her hospital bed. I came home, took a shower, and then I started feeling strange. My skin got hot. Then my face started swelling. You didn't eat anything unusual? No, just my normal lunch. Did you use any new products, new soap, new shampoo? She shook her head. Same stuff I always use. I held her hand, relieved that she was okay, but confused about what could have triggered such a severe reaction. That's when the nurse came in to update Colleen's medical chart. She was an older woman, probably in her late 50s, with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd worked in emergency medicine for decades. She asked Colleen a series of standard questions, confirming her name, date of birth, current medications, and you're not currently pregnant. The nurse asked, glancing at her tablet. No, Colleen said. When was your last period? Colleen hesitated for just a fraction of a second. About 2 weeks ago. The nurse nodded and made a note. And you're not taking any new supplements or vitamins? No. What about prescriptions? The system shows you filled a prescription for amoxicillin 8 days ago at the Walgreens on Chambers Street. Are you still taking that? I felt Colleen's hand stiffen in mine. Oh, that, she said, her voice careful. That was for a sinus infection. I finished the course. The nurse looked up from her tablet. Did your doctor check for allergies before prescribing? Amoxicillin is a penicillin-based antibiotic, and delayed allergic reactions can occur even after you've stopped taking it. I don't remember if they asked. Who's your primary care physician? I'll make a note in your chart. Another hesitation. Dr. Morrison at the clinic on 5th Avenue. The nurse frowned slightly. The records here show your PCP is Dr. Sheffield at Porter Medical Associates. When did you switch? I just used a walk-in clinic for the sinus infection. It was easier than making an appointment. The nurse made more notes, but I could see something shift in her expression. The questions continued, And this sinus infection, were you experiencing the typical symptoms, facial pressure, nasal congestion, post-nasal drip? Yes, all of that. Did they culture to confirm it was bacterial rather than viral? I don't think so. They just examined me and wrote the prescription. The nurse set down her tablet and looked at Colleen directly. Mrs. Bradford, I need to ask you something important. Is there any chance this prescription wasn't actually for a sinus infection? The room went silent. I looked from the nurse to Colleen, confused. What else would antibiotics be for? The nurse kept her eyes on Colleen. Amoxicillin is commonly prescribed for sinus infections, but it's also a standard treatment for certain bacterial infections that can be transmitted sexually. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt my hand slip away from Colleen's. That's ridiculous, Colleen said, but her voice had lost its strength. I had a sinus infection. The nurse's expression softened with something that looked like pity, directed at me. I'm required to document all current and recent medications, especially when we're treating a potential allergic reaction. If you receive treatment for an STI, we need to know that, because the combination of certain antibiotics with other medications or supplements can cause severe reactions. I didn't have an STI, Colleen said, her voice rising despite her hoarse throat. This is inappropriate. Can we please just focus on the allergy? The nurse nodded slowly. Of course, I'll make a note that the amoxicillin was for a sinus infection. But I would strongly recommend you follow up with an allergist within the next week to do a full panel. We need to identify what caused this reaction so you can avoid it in the future. She left the room, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I stood up from the chair, my legs feeling weak, my mind spinning. Aaron, Colleen started. Don't. My voice came out cold. Don't say anything right now. You're not seriously believing this. She was making assumptions. Was it a sinus infection? Colleen's eyes filled with tears. Aaron, please. Yes or no, was the antibiotic for a sinus infection? She looked away. It's not what you think, those 5 words. It's not what you think, are what cheaters always say when it's exactly what you think. I walked out of the room. I stood in the hallway, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER, watching nurses and doctors move past me with purpose while my entire world crumbled. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trust. 8 years of believing that fine was enough. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking. And I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened Colleen's phone account on our shared carrier plan. We'd always had full access to each other's account information, for bill-paying purposes. It had never occurred to me to look before. I pulled up her recent call log. The numbers meant nothing to me at first, just a list of calls and texts, but one number appeared over and over, multiple times a day, sometimes lasting 20 or 30 minutes. I didn't recognize the number. I felt sick. But I needed to know. I copied the number and pasted it into a reverse lookup website. The name that came back was Connor Fitzgerald. I didn't know anyone named Connor Fitzgerald. I stood there in that hospital hallway, staring at the name on my phone screen, feeling like I was watching my life from outside my own body. Everything felt distant, unreal. I walked back to Colleen's room. She was crying softly, her face still swollen from the allergic reaction. But now her tears made her look even worse. Who's Connor Fitzgerald? I asked from the doorway. Her eyes went wide. Who is he? Aaron, let me explain how long. She closed her eyes. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. 6 months, half a year, while I was coming home every night, kissing her hello, asking about her day, sleeping beside her. She'd been carrying on an affair for half a year. Did you love him? I don't know why I asked. Maybe I thought the answer would matter. I don't know, maybe it's complicated. Did you use protection? She flinched. Most of the time. Is that why you needed the antibiotics? Because you got an infection from him? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I felt something break inside me, not my heart. That came later. This was something else. It was the death of naivety, the end of trust. The obliteration of the man I'd been when I walked into this hospital 3 hours ago. I'm going home, I said. I'll come back tomorrow to drive you home when they discharge you. After that, I don't know. Aaron, please don't go. We need to talk about this. No, not here, not now. I can't even look at you right now. I left. I drove home in silence. No radio, no music, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional car passing on the highway when I got home. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat in my home office and I started digging, phone records first. I logged into our carrier account and downloaded 6 months of call and text logs for Colleen's number. The pattern was obvious once I looked for it. Connor's number appeared dozens of times per week. Long calls during her yoga nights, texts sent while I was at work, even some sent while I was in the same house, probably from the bathroom or while I was asleep. Next, I checked our credit card statements. This is where things got worse. There were charges I didn't recognize. Hotel rooms in the city, restaurants I'd never been to, purchases from a jewelry store I'd never heard of, all on our joint credit card. She'd been using our money, my money, To fund the affair, I felt my jaw clench as I went back through 6 months of statements. I added up every suspicious charge, every hotel room, every expensive dinner, every gift that had probably gone to Connor instead of me. $12,000. She'd spent $12,000 of our shared money on her affair. I took screenshots of everything, downloaded every statement, created a folder on my computer labeled evidence, and backed it all up to a cloud drive. Then I did something that surprised even me. I called my brother. It was almost midnight, but Trevor answered on the second ring. He's a lawyer, criminal defense, but he knew enough about family law to point me in the right direction. Aaron, what's wrong? I told him everything, the hospital, the nurse, the phone records, the credit card charges. Trevor listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. First thing tomorrow morning, you call Pamela Winters. She's the best divorce attorney in the state. I'll text you her number. Second, you don't confront Colleen until you talk to Pamela. Third, you document everything, every conversation, every text, every phone call, record it if you're in a one-party consent state. Get everything in writing. We're a no-fault state, I said. Does the affair even matter? It matters for asset division, especially if she spent marital funds on the affair. That's dissipation of marital assets. You can potentially claim reimbursement, and it matters for alimony. A judge won't look kindly on someone who cheated and spent 12 grand of shared money on their affair partner. Okay, Aaron, I'm sorry, I know this is hell, but you need to be smart about this. Don't make decisions based on emotion. Protect yourself first. Thanks, Trevor. Call Pamela first thing. I'll give her a heads up that you'll be reaching out. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my office, staring at the screen full of evidence of my wife's betrayal. And I realized something. I wasn't crying, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just empty that night. I slept in the guest room, or rather, I lay awake in the guest room until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 6 months and wondering how I'd missed all the signs. At 7 a.m., I called Pamela Winters' office and left a message requesting an emergency consultation. At 8 a.m., I went to the hospital to pick up Colleen. She was dressed and ready to go, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. Her face still slightly puffy, but much better than the night before. Her eyes were red from crying. Aaron, she started as I walked in. Let's just go, I said. We'll talk at home. The drive back was silent. Colleen stared out the passenger window. I kept my eyes on the road. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen, making coffee I didn't really want, just to have something to do with my hands. My phone rang. Pamela Winters' office. They had an opening at 1 p.m. If I could make it, I could make it. I'm going out, I called toward the bedroom. I'll be back this afternoon. Colleen appeared in the kitchen doorway, changed into sweatpants and one of my old college t-shirts, something she always wore when she was sick. The familiarity of it made me feel sick. Where are you going? I have some things to take care of. Aaron, we need to talk about what happened. We will later. When later, you're shutting me out. You had an affair for 6 months. My voice was calm, too calm. You contracted an STI? You spent $12,000 of our money on hotels and dinners and gifts for him, so yes. I'm shutting you out right now because if I stay here, if we have this conversation right now, I'm going to say things I can't take back. Her face went pale. You went through our credit cards and the phone records, and I'm going to keep digging because I don't actually know you. Do I? The woman I married wouldn't do this, so I need to figure out who you really are. I made a mistake for 6 months. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Multiple choices, every single day for 6 months. You chose him over me, over us. I grabbed my keys and walked out before she could respond. Pamela Winters' office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture in the waiting room. She met me in a conference room, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. Your brother spoke highly of you, she said as we sat down. Tell me everything. I did, start to finish. The hospital. The nurse's questions, the phone records, the credit card statements, everything I discovered in the past 12 hours. Pamela took notes on a legal pad, nodding occasionally. Her expression neutral and professional. When I finished, she set down her pen. First, I'm sorry you're going through this. Second, you've done everything right so far. You've documented. You've avoided confrontation. You came to me before making any rash decisions. That's good. What happens now? Now we build a case. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't need to prove adultery to get a divorce, but adultery does factor into asset division, especially when marital funds were spent on the affair. We'll file on the grounds of dissipation of marital assets. Can I get that money back? Potentially. If we can prove the $12,000 was spent on the affair, the court can order reimbursement or adjust the asset division in your favor. Do you have documentation of all the charges? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd saved. Pamela smiled slightly. You're an attorney's dream client. This is perfect. What about the phone records? I have 6 months, calls, texts, all time-stamped. Excellent. Now, do you and Colleen have any children? No. Do you own your home jointly? Yes, joint mortgage, both our names on the deed. Any other major assets, retirement accounts, investments? We each have 401ks through our employers. A joint savings account with about 40,000. 2 cars, both paid off. Pamela made more notes. Straightforward division then. Washington is a community property state, so everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50 unless we can prove dissipation. The 12,000 in affair spending gives us leverage. What about alimony? How long have you been married? 8 years. And what's the income disparity? I make about 90,000 a year. She makes about 60. The duration and income gap could potentially warrant some maintenance, but given the circumstances, I doubt a judge would order much, if any, especially with the affair and the spending, but that's something we'd negotiate. How long does this take if it's uncontested? We can have you divorced in 90 days. If she fights, 6 months to a year, 6 months to a year, more time trapped in this nightmare. I want to move forward, I said. File the paperwork. Before we do, I need to ask you something. Is there any chance you want to try to save the marriage? Counseling? Mediation? I thought about it, really thought about it. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Could I look at her and not see her with someone else? No, I said. It's over. Then we move forward. I'll draft the petition and get it filed by end of week. In the meantime, I need you to do a few things. First, separate your finances immediately. Open a new bank account in just your name. Cancel any joint credit cards. Second, document every conversation you have with Colleen from now on. If you're in a one-party consent state, record them. If not, follow up every conversation with an email summarizing what was discussed. Third, do not move out of the house. If you leave, it can complicate things later. We're still living together, for now, unless she moves out voluntarily. I know it's uncomfortable, but it's important for the case. Nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming settle on my shoulders. One more thing, Pamela said. This Connor person, do you know if he's married? I have no idea. Find out if he is, and if his spouse doesn't know about the affair, that's information that might be useful. I understood what she wasn't quite saying. Leverage. I went straight from Pamela's office to the bank, opened a new checking account in just my name, transferred half of our joint savings, $20,000. Set up my paycheck to direct deposit into the new account starting next pay period. Then I went home. Colleen was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes puffy from crying. Where were you? I met with a divorce attorney. The color drained from her face. Aaron, please, we can work through this. No, we can't. I sat down in the chair across from her. I spent $12,000 of our money on your affair. You exposed me to STIs. You lied to me every single day for 6 months. There's no working through that. It was a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. This was intentional. Every time you texted him, every time you met him, every time you lied to my face, those were all choices. She started crying again. I don't know why I did it. I felt stuck, like my life was on rails and I couldn't get off. Connor made me feel alive again. Then go be alive with Connor. File a counter-petition if you want, but we're done. What about the house? We'll sell it, split the proceeds. That's what the lawyer says. Where will I go? That's not my problem anymore. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel, but I was beyond caring about her feelings. Aaron, please, I still love you. No, you don't. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You love the security I provide. You love the life we built, but you don't love me. I stood up and went to the bedroom, started packing a bag with clothes and essentials. What are you doing? Colleen appeared in the doorway. I'm moving into the guest room. We'll live separately until one of us moves out. This is insane. This is what happens when you cheat on your spouse for 6 months and get caught because you needed antibiotics for an infection you got from your affair partner. I pushed past her, carrying my bag to the guest room, and I locked the door that night, lying in the unfamiliar bed. I finally cried, not because I missed her, not because I wanted her back. I cried because 8 years of my life had been built on sand. And now I had to start over. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell, living in the same house with someone who betrayed you, seeing them every day, passing them in the hallway, sharing a kitchen. It's psychological torture. Colleen tried to talk to me constantly, tried to apologize, tried to explain. I responded with 1 or 2 word answers and spent most of my time at work or in the guest room. Pamela filed the divorce petition. Colleen was served at her office, which she was furious about. She called me screaming, accusing me of humiliating her publicly. You humiliated yourself, I told her before hanging up. She hired her own attorney, a guy named Gregory Walsh who had a reputation for being aggressive. He immediately filed a response contesting the dissipation claim and demanding half of everything, including requesting spousal maintenance. Pamela wasn't worried. Let him posture. We have the evidence. No judge is going to give her alimony after what she did. But there was something else bothering me, something the nurse had said at the hospital that kept nagging at my mind. When was your last period? And Colleen's answer. About 2 weeks ago. Been married to Colleen for 8 years. I knew her cycle better than she did sometimes, because I was the one who bought her tampons when she ran out. Her period was like clockwork, every 28 days. The first of every month, give or take a day. It was October when she had the allergic reaction. If her period had been 2 weeks before that, it would have been mid-October. But I'd bought tampons for her the first week of October. I remembered because I'd been at the pharmacy picking up allergy medication for myself, and I'd grabbed a box for her while I was there. Which meant she'd lied to the nurse about when her period was. Why would she lie about that unless? I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Unless she was pregnant, I grabbed my laptop and opened our health insurance portal, logged in with Colleen's information, which I still had access to because we were on the same policy. I scrolled through her recent claims. There it was, 2 weeks before the hospital visit, a claim for a blood test at a LabCorp facility. The diagnostic code was listed, and a quick Google search told me it was the code for a quantitative HCG test, a pregnancy test. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper. The test results weren't in the portal. Those would have gone to the ordering physician, but there was a physician's name listed, Dr. Helena Martinez, Women's Health Associates, not Dr. Sheffield, her actual primary care doctor, and not Dr. Morrison, the fake doctor she'd told the nurse about. This was someone else entirely. I called the clinic first thing the next morning. Women's Health Associates, how can I help you? Hi, my name is Aaron Bradford. My wife Colleen Bradford is a patient of Dr. Martinez. I need to verify some information about a recent visit. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't release patient information without written consent. Even to her husband, HIPAA regulations. I'd expected that. Can you at least confirm whether she's a current patient? A pause. I can confirm that we have a Colleen Bradford in our system, but that's all I can tell you. Thank you. I hung up and called Pamela. We might have a bigger problem, I told her. I think Colleen might have been pregnant. I explained the insurance claim, the lie to the nurse, the visit to a women's health clinic. Pamela was quiet for a moment. If she was pregnant, and if it wasn't your child, that changes things. How? It strengthens your case for dissipation. It also potentially answers the question of why she needed antibiotics. Some STIs can complicate pregnancy, or be a sign of a miscarriage. Can we subpoena her medical records? We can try, but medical records are tricky. We'd need to convince a judge that they're relevant to the case. The dissipation angle gives us an argument, but it's not guaranteed. I need to know. Let me draft a discovery request. We'll demand financial records, phone records, and medical records related to STI treatment. We can frame it as necessary to determine the full extent of marital funds spent on the affair. Do it. The discovery request went out the following week. Gregory Walsh, Colleen's attorney, immediately filed a motion to quash the medical records request. He argued it was a violation of privacy and irrelevant to asset division. We ended up in front of Judge Patricia Harrison for a preliminary hearing. I sat in the courtroom next to Pamela, Colleen and her attorney on the other side. It was the first time I'd seen her since we'd separated living spaces in the house. She looked thinner, tired, guilty. Judge Harrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen every trick in the book. Walsh stood up to argue first. Your Honor, the petitioner is on a fishing expedition. He's using the divorce proceedings to invade my client's medical privacy. Whatever medical treatment she received is irrelevant to the division of assets. Pamela stood. Your Honor, we're not on a fishing expedition. We have documented evidence that the respondent spent over $12,000 of marital funds conducting an extramarital affair. She contracted a sexually transmitted infection requiring antibiotic treatment. She visited a women's health clinic for a pregnancy test 2 weeks before her hospital admission for anaphylaxis. These facts are directly relevant to determining whether additional marital assets were spent, and whether there are other financial obligations arising from the affair. Harrison looked at Walsh. Counselor, the pregnancy test is speculative at best. Actually, Your Honor, Pamela interrupted smoothly. We have the insurance claim, diagnostic code 81025. That's a quantitative HCG test, a pregnancy test. The respondent also lied to medical staff at the hospital about when her last menstrual period occurred, which raises questions about what she was hiding and why. Judge Harrison leaned back in her chair. Mr. Walsh, does your client dispute that she had the test? Walsh glanced at Colleen, who whispered something to him. No, Your Honor, but the results of that test are protected medical information that may have been funded with marital assets, Pamela countered. And if my client's wife was pregnant with another man's child, that's directly relevant to understanding the full scope of the affair and any potential ongoing financial obligations. Was she pregnant? Judge Harrison asked bluntly. Looking directly at Colleen, the courtroom went silent. Colleen's face went red. She looked down at the table. Walsh cleared his throat. Your Honor, My client invokes her right to medical privacy. This isn't a criminal trial, Mr. Walsh. This is a divorce proceeding. And if your client was pregnant, and if that pregnancy resulted from the affair, then Mr. Bradford has a right to know because it impacts asset division and potential future obligations. Judge Harrison looked at Colleen again. Mrs. Bradford, were you pregnant? Colleen's voice was barely audible. Yes, the word hit me like a physical blow. And was the pregnancy a result of your relationship with Mr. Bradford or with another party? Tears streamed down Colleen's face. It wasn't Aaron's. Judge Harrison nodded slowly. And what happened to the pregnancy? I had a miscarriage at 8 weeks. The judge made notes on her pad. When did this occur? 3 weeks before the hospital incident. And did you inform your husband? No. Did you inform the father? Colleen's voice broke. No. Judge Harrison set down her pen and looked at both attorneys. Here's my ruling. The medical records related to STI treatment and the pregnancy are discoverable. They're directly relevant to the dissipation claim. The respondent will provide those records within 14 days. Any other medical records remain private. Anything else? Pamela shook her head. No, Your Honor. Walsh started to object, but Judge Harrison cut him off. My ruling stands, Counselor. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. I sat there, frozen, as everyone else stood and filed out of the courtroom pregnant. She'd been pregnant with another man's child, and she'd never told me. Pamela touched my arm gently. Aaron, we should go. I stood mechanically and followed her out into the hallway. Colleen was standing near the elevators with Walsh, crying openly when she saw me. She started walking toward me. Aaron, please, let me explain. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't come near me. I was going to tell you when, after the baby was born, after you passed it off as mine. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do. You knew for 8 weeks, and you said nothing. You were going to let me raise another man's child. Walsh stepped between us. Mr. Bradford, I advise you not to have this conversation without counsel present. I'm not having a conversation. I'm stating facts. I looked. Passed him to Colleen. You're a stranger. I don't know who you are. I thought I did, but I was wrong. I walked away, down the hallway, out of the courthouse, and I didn't look back. Pamela called me that evening. How are you holding up? I've been better. I know this was a shock, but it actually helps our case significantly. The pregnancy, the miscarriage, the deception, all of it supports dissipation and eliminates any chance of her getting alimony. I don't care about the money right now. I know, but you will. Trust me, when this is over, you'll want every advantage we can get you. She was probably right. The medical records will be delivered within 2 weeks, Pamela continued. Once we have those, we'll have a complete picture. Then we move to settlement negotiations. My guess is Walsh will advise her to accept whatever we offer rather than take this in front of a judge. You think she'll settle? I think she doesn't want the details of her affair, the pregnancy. And the SDI aired in open court. Neither does Connor, if he finds out, which brings me to my next point. Have you identified who Connor Fitzgerald is? Just a name and a phone number. I hired a private investigator, former cop, discreet. He did some digging. Connor Fitzgerald is 32 years old, works in finance, lives downtown, and he's married. My stomach dropped. He's married, has been for 4 years. Wife's name is Nina, no kids. Works as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. A nurse. His wife was a nurse, and he'd given my wife an STI. Does Nina know? Not as far as we can tell, but that's information we can use if Colleen doesn't settle. We can make it known that Connor was part of this. His wife has a right to know, and Connor, well, he probably doesn't want his marriage imploding any more than Colleen wants the details of her affair public. It felt dirty, using someone else's pain as leverage. But Colleen had made her choices. Connor had made his. Why should I be the only one suffering? Do whatever you need to do, I told Pamela. The medical records arrived 10 days later. Pamela invited me to her office to review them together. She spread the documents across the conference table. Lab results, doctor's notes, prescription records, a complete medical history of my wife's affair. The STI was chlamydia, Pamela said, pointing to a lab report. Treated with the amoxicillin the nurse asked about. Standard treatment. Could that have caused the allergic reaction? Possibly. Delayed reactions to penicillin-based antibiotics are rare but documented, or it could have been something else entirely. The hospital never definitively identified the allergen. She moved to another set of documents. The pregnancy test was positive. Quantitative HCG level indicated approximately 6 weeks gestation at the time of the test. She had one follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez 2 weeks later. At that appointment, HCG levels had dropped significantly. Ultrasound showed no fetal heartbeat. Miscarriage was confirmed. Did she have a D&C? No, it was a natural miscarriage, complete, no complications noted. I stared at the papers, feeling nothing. I should have felt something. Sadness, anger, relief, but I was just empty. There's something else, Pamela said quietly. She slid another document across the table. This is from her initial consultation with Dr. Martinez, when they take a patient history. I looked at the form. Standard medical questions. Pregnancy history, previous miscarriages, medications, allergies. Then I saw it. Under number of previous pregnancies, the doctor had written 2. Under number of live births, she'd written 0. Under number of miscarriages, terminations, she'd written 2. 2 previous pregnancies, 2 losses. This wasn't the first time. Colleen told me she'd never been pregnant, I said slowly. When we talked about starting a family, she said she'd never been pregnant before, never had a miscarriage, never had an abortion. According to this, that wasn't true. When we've been together for almost 10 years, married for 8, when could she have been pregnant before? Pamela pulled out another document. This is a release form for previous medical records. She authorized Dr. Martinez to request records from a clinic in Portland, dated 6 years ago. 6 years ago. We were married then. Living in Seattle. Colleen had never mentioned going to Portland for anything medical. Can we get those records? They're requesting them as part of current patient care. We might be able to subpoena them, but it would require another court order and Walsh will fight it. Try, but we didn't need to subpoena them because 3 days later, Colleen showed up at the house with a banker's box full of papers. I was in the kitchen when she walked in. She looked awful, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Oaths hung loose on her frame. We need to talk, she said. No, we don't. Yes, we do. She set the box on the kitchen table. I know you got the medical records from Dr. Martinez. I know you know about the pregnancy, and I know you're going to keep digging until you have every piece of my life exposed, so I'm going to save us both the time and pain. What's in the box? Everything, medical records, journals, letters, everything you want to know about who I really am. I stared at her. Because I'm tired of lying, I'm tired of hiding, and because you deserve to know the truth, even if it destroys whatever small piece of respect you might still have for me. She turned and walked out. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the box, not sure if I wanted to open it, but of course I did. I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened the box. The first thing I found was a journal, black leather cover, pages filled with Colleen's handwriting. I opened to a random page, dated 4 years ago. I saw him again today at the coffee shop near work. We talked for 20 minutes, just casual conversation, but I couldn't stop thinking about him all day. What's wrong with me? I have Aaron, I have a good life. Why do I keep thinking about someone else? I flipped ahead 6 months later. I kissed him. I can't believe I did it. We were at the company party and everyone was drinking and he walked me to my car and he kissed me. I kissed him back. Aaron thinks I just stayed late because I was networking. I'm a terrible person. Another 6 months. I ended it. I told him we couldn't keep doing this. He was upset, but he understood. I thought I would feel relieved. Instead, I just feel empty, like I'm going through the motions of a life I don't actually want. I closed the journal, feeling sick. That wasn't Connor. That was someone else. Someone before Connor. I dug deeper into the box. Medical records from Portland. From 6 years ago, pregnancy termination. 12 weeks gestation. The doctor's notes included a section for father's information, if known. The line was blank. She'd been pregnant 6 years ago, while we were married. And she'd terminated it without telling me. Had it been mine, or had it been from the affair she'd been having? I kept reading. There was another set of medical records. From 8 years ago, right before we got married, another pregnancy, another termination, 8 weeks gestation, 2 abortions, 2 pregnancies I'd never known about, 2 decisions she'd made without me. I felt like I was reading about a stranger. At the bottom of the box, there were letters, printed emails, hundreds of them. I picked one at random. Colleen, I can't keep doing this. My wife almost found out. We need to cool things down for a while. I still love you, but I can't risk losing everything. M*, not Connor. Another one. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? D*. Someone else. I went through letter after letter, email after email, different names, different men going back years. Some I recognized. Michael, a guy from her design firm. David, someone she'd worked with at her previous job. Others were just initials or first names I didn't know. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 8 years, had been having affairs almost constantly throughout our entire relationship. Been faithful, committed, present, and she'd been living a completely separate life. I sat at that kitchen table until 3 in the morning, reading through every page, every letter, every journal entry. By the time I finished, I didn't recognize the person I'd been married to. She'd been unhappy almost from the start. She'd felt trapped. She'd craved excitement and validation and attention that I apparently couldn't provide. But instead of talking to me, instead of going to counseling, instead of ending the marriage honestly, she'd lied for years, and the worst part, I'd never suspected, not once. Been completely blind to the person sleeping next to me every night. I called Pamela at 8 a.m. I need you to see something. I brought the entire box to her office, laid it all out on the conference table. Pamela spent 2 hours going through everything. When she finished, she looked at me with something close to amazement. Aaron, this is. I've never seen anything like this. The sheer volume of evidence, the documentation. This isn't just dissipation. This is a pattern of deception spanning your entire marriage. Can we use it? All of it. The financial records alone, if we can tie spending to these other affairs. We're talking about potentially tens of thousands of dollars in dissipation over multiple years. And the medical records, the pregnancies, the terminations without your knowledge. That demonstrates a complete breakdown of the marriage. I want her to get nothing, I said quietly. I want every dollar she spent, every lie she told, every betrayal documented. I want a judge to see exactly who she is. Pamela nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. We spent the next 2 weeks building an airtight case. Pamela's investigator tracked down some of the men Colleen had been involved with, got statements from 2 of them confirming the affairs. One of them, Michael from her design firm, admitted they'd been seeing each other off and on for 5 years. 5 years. We subpoenaed Colleen's personal credit card records, the one I didn't have access to. Found another $30,000 in spending that couldn't be accounted for. Hotels, dinners, gifts. We pulled phone records going back 3 years. Identified at least 4 other phone numbers that appeared with the same frequency as Connor's. The picture that emerged was devastating. Colleen hadn't just cheated. She'd built an entire alternate life, funded by our marital assets. While maintaining the facade of a happy marriage, Pamela filed an amended petition including all the new evidence. Walsh tried to fight it, filed motion after motion, claimed the evidence was obtained improperly, claimed it was irrelevant, claimed it was prejudicial. Judge Harrison denied every motion. Mr. Walsh, she said at one hearing, your client provided this evidence voluntarily. She handed it to her husband in a box. There's no impropriety here, and it's absolutely relevant to asset division when we're talking about potentially $50,000 or more in dissipated marital assets. Walsh had no response. He requested a private conference with the judge. Pamela and I waited in the hallway. 20 minutes later, Walsh came out looking defeated. My client wants to settle. We met in a conference room at Pamela's office. Colleen looked like she'd aged 10 years in months, thin, pale, hollow-eyed. She wouldn't look at me. Walsh laid out their offer. Mrs. Bradford will relinquish all claims to spousal maintenance. She will accept a 40-60 split of assets in Mr. Bradford's favor to account for dissipation. She requests only her personal belongings and her vehicle. Not acceptable, Pamela said immediately. Based on documented dissipation over multiple years, we're seeking an 80-20 split. Mr. Bradford keeps the house. Mrs. Bradford is responsible for half of the joint credit card debt incurred during the affairs, and we want a full written confession, signed and notarized, acknowledging every affair and every dollar spent. That's punitive, that's fair. Your client committed fraud, she stole marital assets, she's lucky we're not pursuing criminal charges. Walsh looked at Colleen, she whispered something. We need to discuss this with our client, Walsh said. They stepped out of the room. I sat there with Pamela. My heart pounding. Do you think they'll take it? I asked. I think they don't have a choice if this goes to trial. A judge is going to give you everything you're asking for and probably more. The confession is the part they'll hate, but it protects you from future claims. She can't come back later saying she was coerced or didn't understand what she was agreeing to. 15 minutes later, Walsh and Colleen came back. We accept, Walsh said quietly. The settlement was finalized 3 weeks later. I got 80% of everything. The house, most of the savings, my full retirement account plus 40% of hers. Colleen got her car, her personal belongings, 20% of the marital assets, which came out to about $18,000 after debts were paid, and she signed the confession, 3 pages detailing every affair, every lie, every dollar spent. Signed, notarized, part of the permanent court record. The divorce was final 90 days. After the initial filing, I stood in Judge Harrison's courtroom, listened to her pronounce us officially divorced, and I felt nothing, no relief, no anger, no sadness, just nothing. Colleen left the courthouse with Walsh. I never saw her again, but the story doesn't end there because 2 months after the divorce was final, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this Aaron Bradford? Yes, who's this? My name is Nina Fitzgerald. I'm Connor's wife. I need to talk to you about what happened with Colleen. My blood ran cold. How did you get my number? I hired a private investigator after I found out about the affair. Can we meet, please? I have questions, and I think you might be the only person who can answer them, against my better judgment. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Nina was petite, dark hair, kind eyes that looked like they'd cried too many tears recently. Thank you for meeting me, she said as we sat down. I know this is strange. It's definitely strange. I found out about Connor and Colleen 3 weeks ago. He finally admitted it after I found text messages on his phone. We're getting divorced. I'm sorry, she laughed bitterly. Everyone keeps saying that, but nobody means it. They're just uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say to that. I need to know something, Nina continued. And I need you to be honest with me. Was your wife pregnant with Connor's child? The question hung in the air. How did you? Connor told me. He said she was pregnant. He said she miscarried. But he said the timeline didn't make sense. He said she told him the baby wasn't his, that it was yours. But then why would she tell him at all? I closed my eyes. She was pregnant. It wasn't mine. We weren't intimate. During that time period, the pregnancy records confirmed it was from her relationship with Connor. Nina's face crumpled. So he lied again. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. She wiped her eyes angrily. I don't want your pity. I want to understand how I spent 4 years married to someone and never knew who they really were. I spent 8 years asking myself the same question. We sat in silence for a moment. Did you love her? Nina asked. I thought I did, but I don't think I knew her well enough to love her. I loved the person I thought she was. Connor keeps telling me it was a mistake, that he got caught up in something he couldn't control, that he never meant to hurt me. Do you believe him? No, she shook her head. But I keep thinking, if I just understood why, maybe it would hurt less. It won't, I said gently. Trust me, I spent months trying to understand, reading her journals, going through every lie, trying to find the moment where everything went wrong. And you know what I learned? There was no moment. This is who they are, selfish, impulsive, willing to risk everything for temporary excitement. Understanding that doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes you realize you dodged a bullet. Nina stared into her coffee cup. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a truck. Connor doesn't know yet. I just found out last week, 6 weeks, right around the same time your wife was pregnant. Oh no, Nina, I'm keeping it. Even though we're getting divorced, even though he's a liar and a cheater, I'm keeping it. Does Connor know about the divorce yet? He knows I'm filing. But I haven't told him about the baby. I don't know if I will. You should. He has a right to know. He had a right to be faithful. He lost his rights when he slept with your wife and got her pregnant. I couldn't argue with that logic. Why did you want to meet with me? I asked. I wanted to see if you were okay. I wanted to know if people actually survive this, or if we're all just pretending. You survive, I said honestly. It hurts like hell. You question everything, but you survive. And eventually, you realize you're better off. Are you better off? I thought about that. I was alone. I was starting over. I was living in a house that felt too big and too empty, but I wasn't being lied to anymore. I wasn't being betrayed. I wasn't living in a fiction. Yes, I said finally. I'm better off, and you will be too. That was 8 months ago. I sold the house last month, bought a smaller condo downtown, started over completely. I heard through mutual friends that Colleen moved out of state. Colorado, maybe. Or Oregon. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Connor and Nina's divorce was finalized around the same time as the house sale. I heard she had a baby boy. I heard Connor fights for visitation. I heard he tells people he's a changed man. I don't know if that's true. I hope it is. For the kid's sake, as for me. I'm dating again, nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners, getting to know people slowly, carefully, with my eyes wide open this time. I've learned some things over the past year. I learned that love isn't enough if it's based on lies. I learned that stability can be a mask for unhappiness if you're not paying attention. I learned that some people are capable of living double lives, and they're frighteningly good at it. I learned that the phrase, I never suspected, is something said by almost everyone who's been betrayed. Because the people who betray us are the ones we trust most. But most importantly, I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was a year ago. If you told me my wife had been cheating on me for years, that she'd been pregnant with another man's child, that she'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on multiple affairs, I would have thought it would destroy me. It didn't. It hurt. God, it hurt, but I survived. I rebuilt, and I'm better for it. So to anyone listening to this who's going through something similar, who just found out their partner has been lying, who feels like their world is ending, I want you to know something. It's not ending. It's changing, and change, even painful change, can be the beginning of something better. You just have to be brave enough to let go of the lie and strong enough to face the truth, because the truth, no matter how much it hurts, is always better than living in a beautiful fiction. That's my story. That's how I discovered my wife's affair through a medical emergency, and how the truth just kept getting worse if you've made it this far. Thank you for listening, and remember, Cheating Story Exposed is here for real stories about real betrayal. Subscribe if you want more. Leave a comment if you've been through something similar, and take care of yourself, because you're worth more than someone else's lies.